Hi friends, welcome to our late autumn yoga practice. Some of you know our traditional giving and thanking morning yoga class. Partial proceeds this year are going to our friends over at the Adult Day Center, one of my favorite places to stop on the Traveling Yoga Roadshow. So if you're interested, we're collecting any amount, is not too small, big, medium, large, in the studio until Friday, December 15th. If that's something that interests you, please feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to make that special delivery. So pull up a yoga mat. You may notice I also have a chair and I have a blanket. Of course, I have my layers and my blocks, and we might use the wall a bit. And of course, all of this can be improvised to do from bed as well. So be creative, see what you have around you at home, and let's get started. So we'll begin with a supine position. So very well, this could be done in your bed or maybe your lounge chair, and just be sure you have some safe space nearby. And if you're next to the wall, measure that out. You might start with your knees bent and lower down, as we like to say, one vertebra at a time. Or maybe it makes more sense to come down one hand or one arm at a time. You could also do this with your legs long and maybe even rolling down a bit. And then once you reach the floor completely, sometimes it feels just right to bend the knees and feel as if the earth is holding you, as she is each and every day, and give everything a moment to balance out. Sometimes I notice one of my hips is a little bit higher than the other. So if I bend both knees for a moment or two or three, it gives that hip a little time to readjust. Now, if you're comfortable keeping your knees bent, by all means stay there, or start to lengthen and reach and stretch and extend, maybe so much so through one side you find a little more space, and then so much so through the other side a little more space, and then reaching through both sides. I'll do this first part in slow motion. We'll lift the head, the arms, and the gaze will move toward the toes. So if you're just starting this out, you might do one leg, you might do the other leg, or of course you could bend both knees and see how that reach, stretch, and then lift just head, heart, and the arms, and your gaze would go towards your toes. So see what works for you. The idea is we want to keep what some call the small of the back connected to the earth. So instead of that place popping up where your hand might have room to fit, we're pressing that down, and that activates your front body, and then your back is protected in this stretch pose is what it's called. So see what works for you. I'll move through a few options. Typically we inhale as we extend, and then we exhale to lift. Find your inhale and find your breath of fire. And then coming down, I say take a break if you need one, come back in. I'm going to give it a try with all limbs this time. So a nice big stretch. Remember, breath of fire is a soft pump at the navel center, and it's fast. So gentle but fast. And then finding your breathing, finding your breathing, finding your breathing. Releasing, finding your breathing. As you feel ready, the invitation is to bend one knee and then the other. You might hold behind the upper legs, you might hold in front of the low legs. You might give it all a really big hug in, even bringing your nose and your head towards your knees. And once again, we'll find breath of fire. So find your inhale and begin. Release, finding your breathing, perhaps some rocking and rolling side to side. And sometimes I simply roll to the side and find my way up to my seat, or sometimes I rock and roll forward and back, and maybe the whole spine receives a massage, coming up to your seat and propping as you wish so that you find a comfortable seat. The fingertips all come to press into the ridge of the palm, and the thumbs will reach up and the arms will come long in the shape of letter V. And this is the last part of our series to energize, recommended for first thing in the morning when you're awakening and before you pop out of bed, finding your inhale, finding your exhale, finding your inhale, and welcoming breath of fire once again. Releasing, finding your breathing. And if you don't mind, we'll take Karuna Mudra, which is the mudra for compassion. Let me tell you a little bit more about it, if I can find my page here. One hand, sometimes we're particular about hands, right? So one hand, the hand that makes the shape of letter L, will be your cupped hand. Here it is. And your other hand will bring all fingertips together. So if you're familiar with the sign language sign for more, the fingertips all come together in the middle. That's what your right hand is doing. Your other hand is cupping, and you bring those fingertips to find what some call the ridge of the palm, like this. However, you hold it so your palms face you. This is the gesture of compassion, and while we're cultivating compassion, we're also supporting cardiovascular, respiratory, and immune system health. This relaxes the face and jaw muscles and reduces stress. Finding your breathing. Good to know the power we hold in our own two hands to create change. And releasing a mudra. And let's make our way up onto the feet. So sometimes we do the good old cross the ankles, arms long, hands together, give ourselves a mighty push. Sometimes we press into some kind of furniture, or we grab our blocks and we press down to lift up, or we can even scooch a block or two underneath us, and just a tiny bit of lift can help us along the way. So let's see what happens. And remember, you can switch up which ankle you'll place in front as well if you'd like. Hands together. If I lean back and give myself a mighty push, it helps my front body activate. And then coming up to stand. And let's find our Vinyasa Krama, Hasta Vinyasas, which can also be done from a chair, from your seat, wherever you are. I'm going to proceed standing, so you'll see what works for you and find the stance that works for you. Some of us take it hips width. I've even had it described to me as sits bones width, and then some of us bring everything a little bit closer together. And you're always welcome to reach out and up or forward and up, noticing if there's a preference for your shoulders. And if possible, one hand comes over to give one elbow a nudge, and that nudged elbow hand reaches for opposite shoulder blade, and then the nudging hand reaches for its opposite side. So no need to force any connection, but to maybe feel what's right for you. And then noticing where the back of your head is, noticing where your breathing is. Fingers interlace, palms press, and we'll release, and we'll go forward and up or out and up as it suits you. For the second Hasta Vinyasa, other hand gives other elbow a nudge, reaching for other side, and knowing that as we do so, finding our breathing. Perhaps you find what works for you in a very specific way. Perhaps you find what you're experimenting with or playing with in the moment. Maybe noticing four corners of feet rooting and grounding. Fingers interlace, palms to sky, and let's do one more, out and up or forward and up. And this time you choose whichever arm hand wants to come over and nudge, but see if you can, instead of reaching for opposite side, can you reach for matching side, and then the nudging hand reaches for its matching side. Your forearms might come a little closer to back of head. Back of head might press gently into the lower arms there. Finding your breathing. And so Vinyasa Krama, as in every single movement we make, we're connecting with the breath. Every breath we take, we're connecting with the movement. Really, truly the traditional classical sense of the word, and krama, encouraging methodically placed steps. Fingers interlace, palms press, and releasing. And we'll take it through our sun salutations. So if you know that you prefer to use a chair rather than go up and down with your knees bending a lot, you can always find a mountain pose holding on to a sturdy piece of furniture, a plank pose without your knees bending, your cobra pose even with the chair. So just remember you have options. Mountain pose, Tadasana, fingers interlace, palms press up, and then the heels lift according to our Vinyasa Krama teachings. And in Hatha or Hatha Yoga, we're growing strength in the pose. We're growing stronger in the asana as we breathe. So a few breaths perhaps in each position, taking it to half squat chair pose. You might check in with the alignment cues if you like and see second, third toe in line with heel. Knees might be in line with that. You can always hold your upper legs or arms in front tends to be kind to the shoulders. And of course you can rise up, and then fingertips to the toe tips, stepping back to lunge. You might hang out there for a moment experiencing lunge. You could take it to a knees down plank or a knees up plank, completely up to you. Coming forward through the shoulders a bit, lifting through center a bit, pressing back through heels, maybe a knees down plank, maybe a medium plank, and finding your way to the earth. Sometimes we start with a Sphinx pose, finding your breathing. Sometimes the pose moves and we release the head and heart and lift up through the shoulders. Sometimes we stay quite still in the pose. Maybe you'll release the head into the hands and hold the jawline for a moment and cross at the ankles for your supported crocodile pose. And then taking it back to child's pose, to puppy dog, to down dog, to whichever pose really truly works for you in this moment, and knowing that you have these options and you can work with a couple or a few, of course incorporating your blocks if you like. Sometimes they're fun to work with, sometimes just a little lift is kind to the wrists, and of course you choose wisely for you. Walking it out, if that helps the dog release the backs of the legs, for me anyway. Let me move a little bit away from the wall. And so from down dog or table pose, let's become a half table or a half dog and pull one knee underneath you, maybe actually rounding the spine a bit if you don't mind, and pushing through your back toes to find your way to lunge. Again, blocks or not, up to you. And then from this place, let's stay and set up for half moon, one variation of it anyway, and warrior three. So I'm going to make a diagonal line from my pinky toe with my block. I like to keep my other block under my hand and shoulder at first, and then as my back leg lifts, I like to bring that block forward. And so we'll see if that back heel will lift. I know I have one foot that likes to turn out for the half moon, but I'm going to ask my toes to reach down a little bit. So if this standing warrior three is not for you, you could do this in a table pose. You could do this from a chair with your hands on the chair and your one leg on the floor. And you could do this at the wall if you wanted to press your hands into the wall and lift one leg a bit. So I'm working with my alignment cues now. I'm asking my back foot to flex a bit. You could practice one or two hands at your heart center. We always have options. You could bring your wings out to the side, maybe wings alongside, and maybe wings in front of you. And then you might even bend that bottom knee and lift up a bit, which is the classical approach to our yoga, our warrior, our Virabhadrasana. You can bring it down, take it for a walk, shake it out, wiggle it out, or you could move directly into your warrior three. So now, oh dear, to our half moon, excuse me, from warrior three. So now my back toes are reaching to the side. My heel is pushing back still, and my top hip is coming up a bit to the side of the room. And this top hand could hold the hip, could press top of hand into low back, could reach up to the sky. And I feel this foot wanting to go a little lower, so I'm going to encourage it to lift up a tiny bit higher. And then top hand releases down, And if possible, the top knee bends and floats outside your front heel. Now, sometimes when I do that, it's really important for me to have a prop under my seat, which could be a towel or a blanket or a pillow. And sometimes it's really important for my bottom leg to come long. And other times it works to bend the bottom leg. You have options, just remember that. Finding space, finding a twist, gazing to the side, or maybe starting to gaze behind you. And here we go for more options. Maybe this elbow moves outside the leg, the knee, and you take a mudra. Maybe not, maybe that hug was just right for you. It changes for me. And maybe this back arm wants to reach around and find some part of your low back or your hip to press into. And this front hand, top hand, could reach under your leg. And if you don't have big baggy pants like mine, it might be easier. And your fingers actually, there they are, might meet. Now, this is not for everyone. This is binding, and it can feel a bit like you're turning yourself into a pretzel. So find your breathing. If you just ate, probably not so much of a twist would feel best. And then coming center, let's give it a counter twist. And when you do the counter twist, remember you can also reach this back hand behind you, or it can settle down. Last month, it was really feeling important for my hand to reach back. I was feeling really tight in my shoulders. Okay, so we've been working a little bit on something called dragonfly. And working is the key word here. So if you'd like, you could grab, let me turn so you can see me. I'm still in my half Lord of the Fish's legs, is what this pose is called. Be safe if you have a candle nearby. You could grab your blocks, or maybe you have books if you don't mind. And actually, I have done this with more than 2 blocks, as long as they don't go slipping and sliding on you, so you could stack up higher if you wanted to. Sometimes we like to go wider than the shoulders. Sometimes shoulders width feels just right. And we'll just see what happens if we start to move maybe into a bit of a side plank. So I've lengthened my bottom leg. I'm pressing into the outer edge of my bottom foot. I'm going to move my elbows back toward my upper body and practice that dragonfly pose. So I have a bit of a twist going on with my upper body. I've moved from my half Lord of the Fishes to the inner edge foot side, as opposed to where I was binding. And my elbows are moving back toward me rather than away from me. And eventually, is the key word, I'll invite this foot to step up onto the back of this upper arm. Imagination is a wonderful thing. Oh, I know what I did too. Sometimes I bring this block on a horizontal so that my hand has room, and then my other hand wants to do that too. And then I have room to maybe step this foot up onto the block, and it starts to move a little bit closer to my arm, and then maybe I could start to lift this foot off the ground just a little bit. Whew. And then come back center, and let's start all over again. So here we are, crossing ankles, arms long, hands together, giving ourselves a mighty push however we can, and coming up to stand for mountain pose number 2, Tadasana. And allowing ourselves to be playful in the middle of it all. Releasing to your half squat. From Tadasana, the mountain, we move to Ardha Utkatasana, the chair. Fingertips to toe tips, the other foot steps back for a bit of lunge where you might hang out a moment. You can always bring your back knee down, taking it to a high plank. I like to practice the Chaturanga Dandasana in slow motion so that we're strengthening, finding your way to Cobra, the Bhujangasana. Taking it back, child's pose, puppy dog, down dog, remembering you have options and they all work. Maybe for the wrist's sake, you'll bring the hands to hold on to the heels as you rest the head and neck. Transitioning as it makes sense for you. Half table or half dog on the other side. That knee moves underneath, rounding the spine, maybe even holding the knee there for a bit and then stepping forward to your lunge. You can always bring the back knee down as we set up for Warrior 3 on the other side. And working again, if you like, with alignment cues. Sometimes I like to work with them for sure. Other times I like to give them a break. I have my back heel pressing back and my toes reaching down. And then finding where your hands and arms wish to be, which flight pattern makes sense for you in your Warrior 3 practice today. Maybe your standing leg need is a little bending and extending. And then releasing hands, let's transition to the Warrior 3. So the toes reach out to the side, the heel pushes back. Hand comes to your hip or your low back, or you're reaching up to the sky. And I know that top foot likes to travel down a bit, so I'm going to encourage it to reach up just a tiny bit more. Remembering you can do this at the wall, with the wall behind you actually. You can do this with your hands on a chair, on the seat of the chair. And then top hand releases, bending knee and floating that knee down outside your front foot. Finding half Lord of the Fishes. On the other side, remembering your option to bring the bottom leg long, remembering your option to sit up on something, which sometimes makes space for the knees and the hips. Finding space, finding your breathing, finding the twist that suits you. And really you could reach this back arm even in the twist behind you, which if you didn't do so on the other side, you could add that in another time if you feel like you want to be more balanced. This backhand could find your low back somewhere, and this front arm could move outside your knee. I like the mudra for patience, courage, and determination, middle finger to thumb. And of course, this hand can move underneath through all the baggy pant material. The fingers can find each other, and we might gaze to the side, or we might gaze behind us. And then coming center and giving it the counter twist as it suits you, remembering that backhand could reach behind if that feels like a good release for you, or it can settle down behind you. And then let's see what happens on this side. So we're on the inner edge of the knee, the side where the inner edge of the front foot. We'll bring the blocks, or whichever you have, and we'll find what works over here. Maybe shoulders width, maybe a little wider, and then the elbows moving back towards you. I think I need a little more space. And maybe that bottom leg coming long and you lifting up into almost a side plank. So the outer edge of my long leg foot is pretty actively flexed there, and bending the elbows back towards you as we do a little dragonfly prep. Whew, it's a little tricky on this side for me. I'm going to see about bringing my blocks to a vertical, so maybe this foot will agree to pop up onto this block. We'll see what happens. Lifting up, popping the foot up, bending the elbows, and imagining maybe that long leg foot lifts even just a tiny bit, and coming down. For a moment, let's take what some call the double pigeon, and some call this fire log. So I have ankle to knee, and knee, this foot sometimes wants to slide back near my hip, so I'll see about sliding that out and having knee above ankle. And you can always fill the space with a block or something softer if you like. Sometimes when we have something to press into, it's just right, and we know where we are in space then. And if this pose is not for you, because it can be a bit much for knees and hips sometimes. For a while I didn't want to practice this at all, and I'm welcoming it back now. You could also take a seated sage. So maybe a shin in front and a shin to the side. And then sometimes one hip pops up a bit, and finding your breathing. So options, good to know that we have them. Finding your breathing. And I have my feet pretty much flexed here, so it's very different than cross-legged pose that we often begin or end our practice in. And then coming undone, maybe you'll give those knees a hug for a moment behind the upper legs, in front of the low legs, or you could go for the big bear hug again if you like. And then finding our blocks close by, crossing ankles, arms long, hands together. This one's been tricky for me. I'm usually needing a little block underneath me. Right now, it's changed. And giving yourself a mighty push and imagining coming up to stand, maybe with your blocks. And we'll get there when we get there. And let's find our way through mountain to chair pose, Tadasana, to Ardha Utkatasana. But then from chair pose, let's see what happens if we hold the hips. Lift one foot up so we have an ankle above the knee. You could stay there. Hands come to your heart center. You could do this in a chair too, with your seat on the chair, a foot on the floor, and your ankle above your knee. And then maybe, just maybe, you'll bring an elbow to tap your foot, or maybe that elbow will move to the arch of your foot, and you could make a fist with your bottom hand if you'd like to press into your top hand. Finding your breathing. and then coming center. And you might need to or want to walk it out, shake it out, round it out. And let's see what happens on the other side. Inviting your mountain. Some say we're all on that same mountain, making our way up on our very own paths. Some say we're even on the same path, on that same mountain, just in different spots. And finding your 1.5-legged half squat. So I have my ankle just above my knee. You might choose to bring your ankle a little closer to your hip. You'll see what works for you. And now matching elbow might just tap the foot, or you could bring that elbow to the arch of your foot, making a fist if you like, with your bottom hand, and pressing into your top palm. Finding your breathing, finding your soft gaze. And then unwinding, coming center, shake it out, wiggle it out, round it out, find your balance. And let's see if we want to grab our blocks, stack them, and have them nearby your pose now. So I'll go back to my first side, inviting some space. Inviting release. Inviting the 1.5-legged half squat. Inviting the twist. Inviting the fist if that works for you. And now the bottom hand could reach for a block or blocks, and the top hand could reach for the sky. So I'm going to adjust my blocks here and see what happens. And now when my bottom hand comes down, my top foot is agreeable to pressing into the back of my upper arm, not my elbow, but just above that. And then my top hand could come down, and maybe from this place, I'll just, this is my excuse, my arm warmer is slippery. Let me see if I find my skin. There's a little more grip, yes there is. And maybe that bottom foot will start to lift up just a second, or maybe it will lengthen, or maybe you'll take your full squat with 1.5 legs and find your balance. Whew. And then ask for help if you get stuck. Get the oil can. Let's take a moment before we go to the other side and find our staff pose. Finding space. Finding release, and finding breathing. So if there's anything that working with children teaches me, it's to laugh a bit more. And of course, emotions run high during different phases and stages for all of us, really, truly. But to release some idea of being perfect, and allowing myself to trip and fall even. And if we know how to catch ourselves when we trip and fall, then I think that helps us become stronger, right? And so children, if we watch them play or learn, there's a lot of that going on. And then somehow we so-called grow up and we don't want to do that anymore. But really it works with our balance. If we give ourselves moments where we're feeling uneven or imbalanced, we can play with it a bit and find homeostasis again, which is all good work for the brain and everything in the body, actually. I know it's easier said than done. And then coming up, we've been doing a lot of twisting and turning, so let's do a little opening before we go to the other side. Maybe a tabletop for a moment, giving low back a little nudge, lifting hips a little higher, and coming down. And let's move those blocks to the other side. So I'll actually turn to face this way so that we can see each other. And let's see what happens over here. So if you'd like, arms long, hands together, giving yourself with the crossed ankles a mighty push, and coming up to stand. Oh, I want to stand this way. And I think this will be our last time inviting some space. Inviting release. Inviting balance. Other foot comes up. Inviting the twist. Inviting the release. Oh, if you wanted to take a moment with the fist, sometimes that helps us create a little more of a twist. Let me take a moment and situate my blocks. And situate the arm warmer. And let's see what happens here. So again, my foot is on the back of my upper arm, just above my elbow, so not on my elbow. And then from this place, I'll see if I want to maybe, oh, this foot is sliding, just start to lift that back leg. And I'm improvising. I have my shin on the back of my arm, but we can all start somewhere. Whew. And maybe that's a half dragonfly. And so there are other ways to come into this position, but that was a couple of ideas anyway. And here we are in that, what some call double pigeon or fire log pose on the other side. I don't think we did the other side yet. So maybe flexing the feet, and you know, if this is not for you, to give yourself permission to take the seated sage, which for either pose you might like a little roll of blanket underneath your seat. Sometimes lifting up a little higher can just give the hips and the knees something different to experience. And letting yourself be where you are, if at all possible. I know it's tricky once I have in my mind that I know how to do a pose, or that I want the pose to be or look or feel a certain way. I can get stuck there a little, and my body will let me know, well, maybe you can do it, but maybe there's a better way for the body to do it. Or maybe in the past I could do it, and suddenly my body is saying, no, not today. And that's been an interesting lesson for me, for sure. And then from our fire log or your seated sage, let's unwind again and shake those legs out and find the Dandasana, the staff pose. I like to flex my feet here and invite a little more space. And invite a little more breathing. Breathing, always super important, but really in particular right now, remembering to breathe before we speak, remembering to breathe before we do, remembering to breathe to be, remembering we are human beings, and so often we feel like human doings, right? That to-do list I'm pretty attached to. And so giving myself time with the breath, giving myself time to sit with the mudras and the mantras, the gestures and the sounds, giving my mind something different to do. So very important right now. So alignment folks might have us claw the fingertips here and cup the palms. Kundalini folks might have us move the hands from the knees down to whichever you come up with, is what I say. They might say to your toes. It's not a requirement. Vinyasa Krama might have us holding, cupping top of toes, or sometimes we interlace fingers and the tops of the hands meet the bottoms of the feet, finding your breathing. Maybe inviting your exhale to become twice as long as your inhale, which is a typical way to calm the human system for most of us. And the forward fold is also a typical way to calm the human system. Now you can see I've folded pretty much all the way forward and my back is rounding a bit, and some of us would prefer to have a longer extension. So just noticing what makes sense for you. And sometimes it's a very specific request that my body makes that I'm learning to listen to, and other times I can work with a few options. And then fingers interlace, palms press. Let's bring the hands maybe about a foot behind you, and then reverse table or reverse plank. Your toes can point, your hips can lift. And finding your breathing. Maybe low back gets a little nudge, maybe hips lift a little higher. Releasing. Finding your cobbler's pose as you wish, soles of feet together, holding ankles or toes. Sometimes I lift the toes a bit, sometimes not. Sometimes I stay long and tall in my seat, and other times I bow forward toward my feet. And then releasing your feet, and if you like, you could pretend to open your foot book and bring the outer edges of feet together, and even the pinky toes and the other toes can reach out. If you like, you don't have to do this. And you might even massage your feet and give a little extra attention to the place around the heel, pressing with the thumbs. You might trace around the ball of foot a bit. All kinds of pressure points in our feet. All kinds of nerve endings in our fingers, palms, toes, and soles of feet, right? And maybe even imagining your foot book for a moment and what you're inviting to reset with this new moon, and remembering the power of our thinking and our imagination, and the ability for those of us who maybe feel like our small actions don't equal to a lot, but for sure how we treat each other, how we hold the door for each other, how we greet each other, it all makes a difference for sure and adds up. And so finding our way now to release to the mat. We've done a lot of twisting, so your back might be quite ready to rest, or it may feel like it really wants to do a little more spinal twisting, so you have the option to add that on. I'm going to come down and grab my layers and have my blanket. Let's see, maybe a little open heart work would be good for right now too, all of us. need to be brave and courageous to open our hearts, maybe even a little bit or a lot bit more, as there are lots of good folks in need of our open hearts now. What did I do? I wanted to do an open heart pose, so I'm going to see about a medium block behind my shoulders, maybe a taller block behind my head. That's what was working for me, but it may have changed. And I want a roll under my knees just to give them a little prop up here. So I'll hold the block where my shoulder blades are, and then where, let's see, sometimes it's the middle of the back of my skull that feels just right, and sometimes it's the base of my skull, the occipital lobe area, that feels just right. And I can hear the heat popping on as it grows chillier, so finding your layers, finding your open heart, finding your courage to have an open heart, to not hide it away, to not look away, to be able to see what is going on, to find our prayers, our affirmations, to do the work that speaks to our souls, whether it be signing a petition, reading an article in attempts to understand something better, maybe watching a documentary that comes recommended that is educational, seeking understanding. Maybe it's simply and not so simply listening and breathing while we're listening, and letting that be a practice for sure. And all of this that we do on the mat supports us in those endeavors. When you feel complete, beginning to awaken as it suits you, maybe bending the knees a bit to bring the hips and part of the back into a prep for releasing the upper back. If you want to keep the legs long, you'll see. You could press down to lift up. You could remove your props and move to one side, and finding your way back. And of course, if you want to stay longer in the constructive rest part of your practice, please do what's good for you. We did a good amount of breath of fire in the beginning of our practice. So let's end a bit with Kapalabhati, which is similar but different, just like we are, similar but different. And the Kapalabhati is the belly muscles actually act as if they're snapping back toward the spine. And on that snap, we're pressing the exhale through the nose. So it's more forceful, much more forceful, it seems, than breath of fire, but it's slower. And for Kapalabhati, you're welcome to bring the arms out and up, and you could even return to the forearms crossed or the hands reaching for matching shoulder blades if you like. So let me see how that works for me today. Finding your inhale, finding your exhale. Maybe inhaling more than you think you can. And beginning. Releasing your breath, resting your hands, finding your breathing. And perhaps taking the mudra for non-violence, which is fingertips together, the knuckles, the ridge of palm knuckles come out a bit, and your thumbs move just a tiny bit inside your index fingers. And you could hold this mudra wherever you're needing or wanting to feel a bit more non-violence. Remembering it begins within our self-talk, our thinking. And from this gesture of nonviolence, we'll close with sound sham, which promotes peace and calm, promotes the need to detach and be content. Beneficial for our nervousness, helpful during stress, helpful even for tremors and shaking and palpitations, helpful for our really big emotions, and helpful with pain. Sham, S-H-A-M, a lot contained within one tiny seed, a bija, a Sanskrit bija, sham. 3 times after inhale as you wish. Sham. 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 Thank you, friends, for sharing your practice with me. We're in the studio Monday through Saturday. You're welcome to join us as it suits you. This video in particular was created for a friend who comes for a yoga private, an individual lesson, and then we create a video for them to practice with at home. So that's an option as well. Really, truly, wherever you are, we could create a video for you based on your wants and needs and maybe whichever your body is going through. So be in touch if you would find that helpful, and I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Take good care. Satnam, truth. Namaste, I honor you. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. May we have peace. May we be peace. And may we be living examples